we need to do quite a lot of prep work to our 4 input datasets to get to the required output table. So let's dive straight in, looking at our students dataset first. So this has a row for each student and the subjects that they're taking. Now, some students may take multiple subjects, so we're going to want to have just one subject per line. So we're going to have to do some reshaping of our data in order to count how many students there are for each subject. So that's what we'll do first. We'll use Tableau Prep split functionality. If we look here, we'll use a custom split because the automatic split doesn't return all the values for us on that / and separate off all of those. So if we do that, then we get our 3 fields here where we can see quite a lot of nulls, but that's because not everyone takes more than one subject. So if we just do that, then we'll go straight into our pivot where we use a wildcard pivot to search for that split word that is common across all of our fields that we have split there. And that just gives us our nice pivoted data. We just rename this to be subject, get rid of the pivot names, etc. And now we're in a place where we're ready to just group by our subject and count, group by our subject and our age, sorry, and just count how many names are taking each of those. So we'll rename that to be our number of students having grouped by our subject and our age. Now, if we're curious about how many hours they need to be taught, well, that's based on their age and the subjects they're taking. So if we have a look at the hours data set, then we see that we've got this age group again. This is something that's going to need to be split up because it's 13 to 14. We kind of want there to be a row for 13-year-olds, a row for 14-year-olds, and see how many hours they need to be taught. So we do very much the same steps where we just do a split on this field. This time the automatic split works. And then we use that wildcard pivot search again on the word split. And now we have a row for each age group and how many hours they need teaching each week. So we can just join this on to our students dataset. Now I'm going to look at the room capacity. So if we look at our rooms dataset, then we can see that we've got a list of rooms, the subjects, and how much capacity they can have. We don't really need to know about the individual rooms because we're not actually going to be going into that much detail of allocating classes to rooms. So we just need the total capacity for each subject. So we simply need to group by our subject and sum that up. Now before we will then also join this onto our sort of data set that we've got flowing here on the subject, of course. Now we need to work out how many of those classrooms we're going to need for each subject for each age group. So that means that we're going to need to know how many classes do we need. So the number of students divided by the capacity, and we want the sort of upper bound of that. So we use the ceiling function. So if we have a look at an example here, which ones need 2 classrooms? Well, unfortunately, if we've got 51 students but the capacity is 50, then we still need 2 classes because we can't have 51 people in a room. It's just not safe. So we would need there to be 2 classes for that. And then if we're looking at, therefore, we know the number of classes required. So how many teaching hours do we therefore need? So we would need to have the classes required times by the hours teaching per week that came from our hours dataset. So that's how we get to the total teaching hours and the classes required fields. So then we can just aggregate those on the subject level and sum those up. So we no longer care about our sort of granularity of the ages of our students. Now we need to know about our teachers. So if we have a look at this dataset before any cleaning, then we've got a list of the teachers and which subjects they teach. Some teach more than one, for example, Mr. C, and what days they work on and what ages they teach. So how are we going to work out how many subjects they teach? How many hours they can work. So they work 6 hours in a working day. So we need to basically count how many days they work. So one way that I thought of to do this was to clean this data set by removing all the letters so that you only have commas remaining, and then the number of days that they work is the number of commas plus 1. So if we just double click on this where I've cleaned that, then we've got this regex replace formula where it just replaces any actual letters. So I copied and pasted this. So I copied this, let's just get rid of that. And then I pasted that into my formula here. So that's just what I've pasted in. And we're just looking at the length of that, so the number of commas, and adding one. So that's how many days they work, and then multiplying that by 6. So that's how many hours that they work in a week. Now I want to know how many subjects they teach. So I used an LOD for that. So I'm just saying for each of our teachers, count distinct the number of subject they teach. So that's what's going on here in the calculation. And then just rename that to be number of subjects so that I can work out how many hours they have for each of those subjects. So working hours divided by the number of subjects, because they have to be split evenly between those two subjects. So obviously if they only teach one subject, that will just stay as their normal working hours, but for teachers with 2 or more subjects, then that will be reduced accordingly. So now we can just sum together for each of the subjects, not really caring about the individual teachers themselves anymore, and then we get to our potential teacher hours. So now it's just a case of joining that onto our data set up here on the subject again, getting rid of a few columns, and working out that our utilised field, which Carl's described to us as being the total teaching hours needed divided by the potential teaching hours, we've multiplied that by 100 and rounded it to no decimal places to be a whole number, and we get the value that we are after. And we can see that we have a little bit of a problem with chemistry because we don't have enough teachers to teach chemistry. So that's definitely something that I hope they get rectified pretty soon. So thank you for listening to the solution. I hope that that was clear how to get to those values. So thanks.